India and China, two ancient civilizations, two modern superpowers, and two complex historical rivals. Today we'll explore how their intertwined histories shaped their present circumstances, and whether they can escape the looming potential threat they find themselves in. This threat, known as the Thucydides Trap, is a term coined by American political scientist Allison, and is based on the ancient Athenian historian and military general Thucydides. He suggested that the outbreak of the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta in 431 BCE was inevitable because of the Spartans' fear of the growth of Athenian power. How can they avert this fate? What are the key issues that could spark or prevent a violent clash? In a world where conflict seems to erupt around every corner, what is the endgame for this downward spiral? The chronicles of Chinese and Indian relations are steeped in millennia of a symbiotic yet sometimes contradictory history. Today we'll dive into the bedrock of these interlacing civilizations, revealing layers of cultural confluences and the germination of our modern ideological divergences. The tale of these two ancient civilizations began over 2,000 years ago. This period saw the intrepid footsteps of traveling monks and traders threading the pathways between these enduring cultures. Buddhism, which bloomed from Indian soil, found its way to Chinese hearts through these routes, cementing a bond laced with spiritual enlightenment and philosophical awakening. Texts and teachings transposed into Chinese annals paved the way for broader cultural and intellectual exchanges, solidifying a relationship built on mutual admiration and respect. However, beneath this veneer of collaboration lurked a silent strain. The contrast in governance systems and philosophies laid the groundwork for future friction. India, with its variegated quilt of kingdoms, what has often been described as a symphony of pluralistic tunes, stood in sharp contrast to the Chinese model of imperial uniformity. Chinese dynasties often propagated the mandate of heaven, a doctrine that harmonized the existence of a single sovereign ruler with cosmic order. In contrast, India's political fabric was embroidered with a myriad of local rulers, often engaging in shifting alliances and vying for autonomy and sovereignty. The Han dynasty, known for its political stability and expansionist policies, initiated formal diplomatic engagements with some of these Indian states by sending missions across the challenging terrains of Central Asia around 202 BC. These emissaries established not just trade, but also avenues of knowledge and technology transfer. Chinese interest in Indian astronomy, mathematics, and architecture exploded, leading to scholarly pilgrimages and knowledge quests from the high halls of Nalanda to the sacred groves of Taxila. Trade ties between the two juggernauts also scaled new heights during this transformative epoch, culminating into what's known today as the Silk Road, a cobweb of intercontinental trade routes. It became the bustling artery of material and cultural exchange. Precious stones, silk, and spices traveled from east to west, while philosophy, art, and religious ideals journeyed from west to east. This route served as the conduit for civilizational cross-pollination that left indelible influences on language, culture, and everyday life. Archaeological and literary evidence of the time point to a period of rich dialogue between these cultures. The flourishing of Indo-Chinese Buddhist communities and the strategic marriages between their kingdoms endorsed a culture of collaboration. India's societal tapestry, inherently syncretic, embraced Chinese elements with an effortless grace. By the same token, Chinese architecture, music, and gastronomy began to harbor subtle Indian inflections. However, not all was harmonious. These times also whispered of veiled competition and quiet power struggles, setting the stage for a complex relationship. While ancient armies never crossed swords and territorial tensions were yet to rear their modern heads, there were competing economic and political interests that presaged the rivalry of later centuries. Intellectually, too, there existed disagreement. Debate stages often found Indian and Chinese scholars on opposite spectrums of spiritual and philosophical discourses. These differences, while emblematic of a healthy exchange of ideas, also unveiled fundamental dichotomies in thought. Over time, this dimension of their interaction would sow the seeds of discord, as the nuances of their divergent philosophies became entangled in their geopolitical dance. Thus, the Silk Road encapsulated the duality of Sino-Indian relations, its legacy a juxtaposition of shared growth against a backdrop of burgeoning aspirations for their regional dominance. Fast-forwarding to the world of modern empires and industrialized economies, the intersection of Chinese and Indian destinies fell under the boot of European colonialism, which had introduced a new complexity of both shared struggles and rising mutual suspicions. This chapter in history paints an era where imperialism reshaped not only vast territories, but also the Sino-Indian ties. Colonial powers, with their insatiable appetite for trade domination and territorial expansion, cast a long and dark shadow over Asia for hundreds of years. India, often labeled the jewel in the crown of the British Empire, unfortunately succumbed to a direct colonial rule. At the same time, China faced a more indirect form of subjugation through unequal treaties and spheres of influence asserted by various European powers. This period witnessed the systematic weakening of our two ancient sovereignties into shells of their former selves. This would leave deep scars in the collective memories and national psyches of both nations, shaping their modern identities and influencing their attitudes towards foreign powers. This period, known as the Great Game, was a strategic rivalry for supremacy in Central Asia between the British Empire and Tsarist Russia, and saw the delineation of frontiers, often arbitrarily drawn by colonial cartographers with little regard for the complex ethnic and cultural realities on the ground. And naturally, this did not go over well to those actually living there and had sown the seeds for the contentious border issues that would beleaguer Sino-Indian relations for centuries to come. They also projected an image of superiority over Asian civilizations and strategically emphasized the differences between Indian and Chinese societies, creating a divide-and-conquer situation. The narrative of cultural superiority effectively alienated two neighboring civilizations, which had seen millennia of continental harmony and exchange. However, within both oppressed nations, the anti-colonial movements gathered strength. India's long struggle for independence was emblematic of resistance against colonialism, with leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru becoming global symbols of liberation. Similarly, China experienced seismic changes through the fall of the Qing dynasty, the Republican Revolution, and the subsequent rise of communism. As the walls of colonialism fell, both nations emerged with a fervent desire to reclaim lost glory and assert their rightful place as sovereign entities in our modern world. In the wake of the Second World War, Asia experienced a surge in national consciousness and calls for independence. India and China, previously under foreign rule, gained theirs, but their journeys were distinct from one another. In 1947, India emerged as a democracy. Meanwhile, China, after enduring a lengthy civil war, established itself as a socialist state with a communist ideology in 1949. The leadership in both nations had different visions. Nehru's India pursued a democratic socialist approach, while Mao's China embraced Marxism-Leninism. Despite ideological differences, a brief period of camaraderie existed, symbolized by the phrase Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai, translated to Indians and Chinese are brothers. Yet underneath this, both nations were competing for regional influence. During the Cold War, both countries navigated through suspicion and shifting alliances, using their respective ideologies. India favored a mixed economy while China opted for a state-controlled model. Both took to modernizing their militaries while recovering from the impacts of colonization and the civil unrest that followed its demise. The McMahon Line, a disputed border, posed a threat to their fragile peace. Tensions escalated when India offered asylum to the Dalai Lama in 1959, which China viewed as an intrusion. This event marked the beginning of yet another new era of discord and rivalry. The path to normalization faced significant obstacles, including the annexation of Tibet, the China-Pakistan alliance, the many disputed regional boundaries, and the influences of major world powers. This became especially apparent after 2013, when China's GDP became 4 times larger than India's, further complicating their relationship. The fleeting sense of brotherhood gave way to strategic rivalry and competing nationalist narratives, setting the stage for future confrontations. The high Himalayas, once a peaceful passage for the ancient Silk Road, became a theater of military standoffs and clashes in the 20th century. The tranquility of the beautiful landscape was disrupted by the escalating tensions that led to the Sino-Indian War. The aforementioned McMahon Line in the eastern sector and the Aksai Chin region in the west became points of contention. The war, although brief, resulted in a devastating defeat for India, leaving a lasting impact on the national psyche and reshaping its defense policies. The war also inflicted a deep wound on bilateral relations, freezing diplomatic ties and eroding trust. China solidified its hold over Aksai, a region they deemed vital for its access to Xinjiang and Tibet. In response to the surprise conflict, India embarked on a substantial military modernization program. The images of battle-hardened soldiers on both sides, juxtaposed against the peaceful exchanges of traders centuries ago, symbolize the drastic transformation in ties. After the war, a tacit understanding to maintain peace along the borders emerged, allowing for a period of relative calm but little resolution. However, the underlying issues continued to smolder beneath the surface. Occasional skirmishes and standoffs, such as the clashes at Natula and Chola, served as reminders that peace was precarious. Both nations, aware of their rising stature on the world stage, sought influence in South Asia and the Indian Ocean. Naval buildups and strategic partnerships mirrored their aspirations, occasionally leading to proxy contests for influence in countries like Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar. In 1988, a thaw in relations occurred when Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited Beijing, opening doors to dialogue and confidence-building measures. This political overture, a first in decades, was a tentative step towards reconciling their complex past. Yet, despite these efforts, the ghosts of the 1962 clash loomed large in strategy rooms and public memory alike. As such, this was evident during the Doklam crisis, where Indian and Chinese troops faced off on the border tri-junction between India, China, and Bhutan. The standoff served as a stark reminder that the border disputes remained a flashpoint capable of igniting conflict. Thankfully, the calculated restraint on both sides averted a larger confrontation, with diplomacy eventually prevailing. In 2020, the Galwan Valley became a significant point of conflict between India and China, escalating tensions to unprecedented levels. The conflict was unique as it saw soldiers from both sides engaging in melee combat, using crude weapons such as iron rods and nail-studded clubs instead of firearms. This unusual choice of weaponry can be traced back to a 1996 agreement between the two countries, which prohibited the use of guns and explosives along the disputed stretch of the border to prevent escalation. The brutal conflict resulted in the death of 20 Indian soldiers, with India reporting 25 to 40 Chinese fatalities. While we've explored a few significant conflicts between India and China, it's important to note that these are just a fraction of the numerous incidents that have occurred along the disputed border. These conflicts, each unique in circumstances and outcomes, have contributed to the complex tapestry of their ongoing border disputes. The repeated clashes have underscored the need for increased military capabilities, leading both nations to embark on paths of military modernization. This rapid advancement, a direct response to the conflicts, has added another layer of complexity to the intricate narrative that continues to evolve between India and China. Moving into the 20th century, both India and China embarked on paths of military modernization, driven by their aspirations to become regional and global powers. China's military reforms since 2015 have improved the jointness and integration of its military, especially the air and ground forces in the region. In response, India has augmented its infrastructure network along the Sino-Indian border, raised a new mountain strike corps, and enhanced its strategic forces. The nuclear dynamic between the two nations also plays a significant role in their relationship. Despite ongoing military engagements along the line of actual control, the Sino-Indian nuclear relationship so far remains stable, largely due to both countries' second strike nuclear doctrine. In the diplomatic arena, both nations are entwined in a complex web of regional and global alliances. India's alignment with the Quad, involving the United States, Japan, and Australia, underscores its strategy to counterbalance Chinese influence, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. On the other side, China's Belt and Road Initiative, with its ambitious infrastructure projects, is viewed by India as an encirclement tactic. Now, it's not all doom and gloom for the two. The BRICS group, comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, plays an increasing role in the global landscape. This intergovernmental trade organization, formed in 2010, represents a significant portion of the world's population and GDP. The BRICS nations have a combined nominal GDP of about 27% of the gross world product and an estimated $4.5 trillion in combined foreign reserves. For India and China, BRICS serves as a platform to articulate their visions of a multipolar world order, acting as a bridge to peace between the two nations. So, all of this leads us to today and our Thucydides Trap. The dynamic is evident in the relationship between the two powerhouses, and reasoning for this is manifold. India's emergence on the global stage and its strategic alliances aimed at managing China's growing influence have resulted in a heightened rivalry between the two nations. This rivalry is further intensified by the modernization of their militaries and their nuclear forces. Both nations have embarked on significant expansion efforts, with China enhancing the jointness and integration of its military forces, and India improving its infrastructure network along the Sino-Indian border. All of this is against the backdrop of still unresolved, deeply rooted issues on the local and governmental level. Despite the challenges, the hope remains that these two nations can navigate the complexities of their relationship to foster peace and mutual growth,